November 18th, 2023. Brandon Ledwidge is at home on Barry Drive in Finglas when he hears a knock on the door. He steps outside into the front garden, unaware that this will be his final moment alive. As he answers, a gun is raised. The shooter, believed to be a member of his own gang, fires multiple times. Bullets strike Brandon in the head and chest, dropping him instantly. It is a calculated close-range execution. Emergency services arrive quickly. Paramedics work to stabilize him before transporting him to hospital, but the injuries are fatal. He is pronounced dead soon after arrival. He had been involved in the Finglas drug trade for years, first as an enforcer for the Gucci gang under Mr. Flashy, then as a dealer for a separate Finglas-based gang. In the days before his death, tensions had been rising. Brandon was killed by someone he knew. But why? Brandon Ledwidge was born and raised in Finglas, an area long associated with gang activity, drug dealing, and violent feuds. For years, the streets around him had been controlled by various criminal groups, and growing up there meant seeing that lifestyle up close. Crime wasn't just something on the news. It was part of everyday life. His uncle, Kevin Ledwidge, was brutally murdered at his home in Finglas. On the morning of July 15, 2007, two men approached his residence, and upon answering the door, Kevin was shot multiple times, leading to his untimely death. At some point, Brandon got involved with the Gucci gang, a violent drug crew led by the well-known gangster known as Mr. Flashy. This wasn't just a group of friends causing trouble. This was organized crime. The gang was known for its flashy lifestyle, love of designer clothes, and ruthless approach to business. Brandon wasn't just on the sidelines. He played an active role as an enforcer, making sure debts were collected and the gang's business ran smoothly. His job was to distribute cocaine, cannabis, and ecstasy throughout Finglas, a role that put him directly in the sight of the authorities. Being in the Gucci gang came with risks. As the gang's reputation grew, so did the heat from law enforcement. Authority operations cracked down on the group, seizing drugs, making arrests, and tightening their grip on their activities. Mr. Flashy, the gang's leader, fled to County Wexford, leaving behind a fractured organization. Without its leader, the gang began to fall apart. Some members were arrested, others went into hiding, and some, like Brandon, had to find a new crew. Brandon aligned himself with another Finglas-based drug gang. This new group wasn't just a replacement for the Gucci gang. It was a separate organization, running its own operations in the area. While Gardaí considered Brandon to be low-level, he was still active in the trade, selling drugs and trying to carve out a place for himself. On social media, Brandon embraced the image that came with his lifestyle. He was regularly seen wearing expensive designer clothes, showing off the kind of wealth that came with dealing drugs. Photos of foreign trips and luxury brands painted the picture of a young man who was enjoying the rewards of his work. But underneath it all, the reality was much darker. He was still just another foot soldier in a violent and dangerous world. In the months leading up to his death, Brandon was already in trouble. He had upcoming court cases for drug possession with intent to supply, and there were whispers that he had fallen out with the people he now worked for. By early 2023, Brandon Ledwidge was walking a dangerous line. He had already survived the downfall of the Gucci gang and repositioned himself within a new crew. But in the weeks leading up to his murder, something changed. Sources close to the investigation revealed that Brandon had made a critical mistake. He had stepped out of line. The exact reason behind Brandon Ledwidge's murder may never be fully known. Only the men who ordered the hit can say for certain. But in the aftermath, theories emerged. Breadcrumbs left by those who knew him, whispers in the streets, and leaked details to the media all point to possible motives. One of the most widespread theories is that Brandon was looking to break away and start his own operation. A source told the media, "It's possible he could have been trying to go out on his own and that's why he was targeted. In the gang world, making moves without permission was a direct challenge to the hierarchy. Brandon had already been through the collapse of one organization. When that gang crumbled under Garda pressure, he switched sides, joining a Finglas-based drug crew. He knew the game well, had connections, and had spent years operating under different factions. Rumors began circulating that Brandon had ambitions of his own. Some believed he was trying to source his own drugs, cut out the middlemen, and build his own network. This would have made him a problem. The gang he worked for controlled the local drug trade and couldn't afford to have one of their own competing against them. If Brandon was trying to step outside the structure, his murder wasn't just about him. It was a warning to anyone else thinking of doing the same. Another theory points to a direct conflict with someone above him in the organization. Authorities learned that Brandon had been involved in a serious dispute with a senior gang member in the weeks before his death. One source stated he was simply a foot soldier who got in way over his head. The argument wasn't something that could be overlooked. Within these groups, power is everything. If a lower-ranking member openly disrespects someone higher up, there are consequences. If they let someone challenge them without retaliation, they appear weak. Brandon's row with a senior figure was seen as an act of defiance, and in this world, defiance is punished with death. The decision to kill him may have been made within hours of the argument, with his execution carried out to send a message. No one steps out of line and lives to talk about it. There is also speculation that Brandon's death wasn't about revenge, but about survival. He was already in legal trouble. Authorities were watching him, and he had pending drug charges for possession of heroin and cocaine with intent to sell or supply. If the gang thought he might cooperate with authorities, they wouldn't take any risks. His murder could have been a preventative measure, a way to eliminate someone who had become too much of a risk. Whatever the real reason was, Brandon's murder wasn't random. It was calculated, precise. Garda held a case conference the day after the shooting, trying to establish a clear motive. But in the streets of Finglas, the message was already understood. Authorities stated, "The answer to this crime lies in the community. The people who ordered the hit weren't outsiders. They weren't unknown. They were the same people Brandon had worked alongside, laughed with, and trusted." One of his friends summed it up best in a social media post, saying, "As you know, you can't even trust your own lads." It was just after 7 p.m. on a cold Saturday evening when Brandon answered the door of his home on Barry Drive, Finglas. Maybe he was expecting a friend. Maybe he wasn't thinking twice about who could be on the other side. But the person waiting for him wasn't there to talk. Gunfire erupted. Multiple shots were fired, hitting him in the head and chest. Door-to-door inquiries began. Officers spoke with neighbors, hoping someone had seen or heard something that could lead them to the shooter. But in places like Finglas, people rarely talk. Fear keeps lips sealed. Behind the scenes, the real fear was what would come next. Would there be retaliation? Would another shooting follow? Brandon's funeral was unlike any ordinary farewell. A fleet of masked men on motorbikes took over Finglas village, revving their engines, turning the streets into a spectacle. These displays had become part of gangland culture, but for all the noise and spectacle, the reality was clear. Brandon had gotten in too deep. He had played a game that never ends well. He was just 23 years old. His story wasn't unique. His path mirrored so many before him. A young man who got involved, made connections, built a reputation, and then, when the time came, was taken out like so many others before him.